My name is Evelyn, but people call me Evie, and I'm 62 years old. The night I learned the truth, I wasn't meant to hear a thing. I had gotten up quietly for a glass of water, but the voices carried down the hallway. My daughter-in-law's whisper was sharp, urgent. The papers will be signed soon. Once she's gone, we can finally move forward. My body froze. She wasn't talking about a stranger. She was talking about me. I gripped the door frame, heart pounding, listening as she muttered about getting rid of her and how Daniel, my son, would come around eventually. In that moment, I thought of the keys I'd surrendered when I moved into their house. My old brass keys, once heavy in my palm, now sat in a drawer miles away, the last piece of my independence. And I realized they wanted even that gone too. Before we continue, tell me, where are you watching from today? Drop it in the comments. If stories like this one resonate with you, hit subscribe. 5 years ago, my world turned upside down. My husband Robert passed away after a sudden heart attack, and I was left with silence where laughter used to be. We had shared that house for over 3 decades, and every corner carried his presence, his tools in the shed, his jacket still hanging by the door. The home became both my comfort and my ache. He had been thoughtful enough to make sure it was paid off completely, leaving me secure. The deed was in my name, tucked in a brown folder inside the old dresser. Daniel, my only child, stepped in soon after the funeral. He was newly married, full of energy, eager to help me adjust. "Mum, you don't have to rattle around in that big house all by yourself," he'd say. "Move in with us. The kids will love having you close, and it'll be company for all of us." It sounded caring, almost protective. I didn't want to be a burden, so eventually I agreed. I packed away my belongings, keeping only essentials, and locked the house. I remember setting my keys on his kitchen counter that first week, telling myself, I won't need these for a while. Life in Daniel's home fell into a pattern. I did the school runs when he was working late, helped with Sunday roasts, folded laundry while my daughter-in-law scrolled through her phone. We'd do the grocery shop together, though I noticed she often grew impatient with how slowly I walked the aisles. Evenings were for television quiz shows, dramas, the kind Robert and I once watched together. On the fridge were photos, Daniel with the children, me cradling my granddaughter, a smiling wedding picture of Robert and me from years ago. I tried to make myself useful. I baked, babysat, kept the kitchen tidy. But sometimes the smallest comments cut the deepest. My daughter-in-law would sigh when I repeated a story or remark, "You're slowing down a bit, Evie. Maybe it's time you let us handle things." Other times she'd ask casual questions about my will or about the paperwork for the house. Once she even laughed, "That old place will probably fall down before long. You're better off here." Her words lingered long after she left the room. Each remark seemed harmless, but they piled up like stones on my chest. I'd finger my wedding ring, twisting it slowly, reminding myself of the life Robert and I built. That ring and the brown folder with the deed were more than objects. They were proof of who I was and what I'd worked for. Without them, I feared I'd be reduced to a guest in my own life. And though I told myself I was imagining things, part of me couldn't ignore the unease. The missing keys, the subtle push to give up control, the way she smiled when she mentioned retirement homes, it all felt like a storm was quietly gathering. It happened on a Wednesday night, one of those quiet evenings when the house seemed to exhale after the children were put to bed. I had gone into the kitchen for a glass of water, careful not to wake anyone. That's when I heard it, low voices drifting from the living room. At first, I thought it was the television left on. But then I recognized my daughter-in-law's tone, sharp and deliberate. She doesn't need that house anymore. It's wasted space. If we move her out, we can get the paperwork signed. Daniel will agree once he sees reason. The words sliced through me. I froze, my hand still on the fridge door. My throat tightened, and I pressed my back against the wall, straining to catch every syllable. "Don't worry," she whispered. "I'll make sure she sees it's for the best. We'll have her in a care home by spring." I could hear the rustle of papers, the clink of glasses. My pulse hammered so loudly I was terrified they'd hear me. My first thought was disbelief. Surely I misunderstood. But then another voice inside me whispered the possibility I dreaded most. Daniel might already know. My legs felt rooted to the spot, as though moving would shatter the fragile safety of ignorance. I wanted to burst into the room, demand answers, but fear sealed my lips. Instead, I stayed hidden, listening as the life I'd carefully preserved, the home Robert left me, the memories we'd built, was reduced to a bargaining chip. I stood there until the whispers faded, then slipped back into my room, clutching my chest. I sat on the edge of the bed, shaking, trying to steady my breath. For the first time, I wasn't sure if I was safe under my own son's roof. And that realization cut deeper than any words ever could. The next morning, I tried to convince myself it had all been a misunderstanding. Maybe I had misheard. Maybe I'd let grief and loneliness twist ordinary words into threats. But the unease clung to me, heavy as a stone in my chest. When the house was empty later that day, I opened the small drawer in my bedroom where I'd kept the brown folder holding my deed papers. My hands trembled as I slid it open. Empty. Not even a scrap of paper left behind. I stood there staring, the air sucked from my lungs. I remembered clearly placing that folder there when I moved in. Robert's careful handwriting had marked the outside, "House deed, keep safe." Now it was gone. I wanted to run straight to Daniel, to demand answers, but the memory of his wife's whisper held me back. Instead, I waited, watched, listened. Over the next few days, I began to notice the small things I'd once brushed off. Conversations hushed the moment I walked into the kitchen. My daughter-in-law's late-night phone calls, her voice low but urgent, always ending abruptly if I passed by. At breakfast, she'd glance at me with a smile, too tight, too forced. One evening, while chopping vegetables beside her, she casually asked about my pension. "You must have it sorted by now, Evie. How much do you get, if you don't mind me asking?" "Wouldn't it be easier if someone handled the bills for you?" The knife nearly slipped from my hand. I muttered something vague and changed the subject, but inside, alarm bells rang. Still, I argued with myself in silence. Daniel wouldn't betray me. He's my son. He held my hand at Robert's funeral. He begged me to live here so I wouldn't be alone. Surely he wouldn't be part of this. And yet, doubt grew with each passing day. At the grocery store, I overheard my daughter-in-law chatting to a friend. "We've been looking into retirement homes. Some of them are really lovely. Honestly, it's time we start thinking ahead." Her voice carried, clear enough to slice through me like glass. I pushed the trolley forward, pretending not to hear, but my heart thundered. It was as though my life had become a play, and everyone else already knew the ending but me. Nights were the worst. I'd lie awake replaying whispers and missing papers, trying to piece together a truth I wished I could ignore. Doubt gnawed at me, but instinct screamed louder. Something was very, very wrong. One morning, as I made the bed, I reached for the small dish on my nightstand where I always placed my wedding ring before sleeping. The dish was empty. My stomach dropped. I searched under the lamp, the rug, even beneath the mattress, though I knew in my bones it hadn't simply fallen. That ring had never left that dish, not once in the 5 years since Robert passed. I spent the day in a haze, glancing at every surface, every drawer, desperate to find it. Late that afternoon, I walked into the living room and felt the air leave my lungs. There she was, my daughter-in-law lounging on the sofa, holding her phone, the gold band glinting on her finger as though it belonged to her. My voice cracked as I asked, "Why are you wearing that?" She looked up, feigning surprise, then laughed lightly. "Oh, this? I found it lying around. I thought you wouldn't mind, Evie. It's such a pretty ring, and it was just sitting there, as if it were meaningless." I swallowed hard, words lodging in my throat. That ring wasn't just jewelry. It was the promise Robert had slipped onto my finger decades ago, the life we built together, the love that had carried me through widowhood. Seeing it on her hand felt like erasure. I wanted to scream, to rip it back, but I forced my voice steady. "That ring is mine. Please put it back," she sighed, sliding it off slowly, her eyes flashing something cold before her smile returned. Of course, no need to be so tense. I slipped it into my pocket, clutching it like a lifeline. But the damage was done. This wasn't carelessness. It was entitlement, bold and deliberate. And if she could take my ring so easily, what else was she willing to claim as her own? After the ring incident, something shifted. My daughter-in-law no longer bothered to disguise her intentions. She began mentioning assisted living as if it were casual dinner conversation. "There's a lovely home not far from here," she said one evening, buttering bread at the table. "They do group activities, and the residents always seem so cheerful. Don't you think, Evie, you'd enjoy being around people your own age?" I forced a smile, my hands tight around my fork, but inside I felt a chill. Gradually, she took over little parts of my life. My post, once placed neatly by the kettle, started arriving already opened. "Oh, I didn't think you'd mind," she'd say with a shrug, waving the envelopes as though she were doing me a favor. My bank statements, pension letters, even junk mail, all filtered through her hands first. Then, one morning, I went to fetch my spare set of house keys, the old brass ones I'd kept in a small box, and found the box empty. I turned drawers upside down, searched coat pockets, even asked the children if they'd been playing. Nothing. When I asked her directly, she raised her eyebrows and replied smoothly, "Keys? You must have misplaced them, Evie. Maybe you're getting forgetful." The words stung more than I let on. Forgetful, helpless. That was how she wanted me seen. Finally, I turned to Daniel. Late one night, while he sat in front of the television, I sat beside him and whispered, "Daniel, something isn't right. Your wife keeps talking about retirement homes." "My papers are missing, my keys too. I'm scared." He sighed, rubbing his forehead, eyes still on the screen. "Mum, you're overthinking. She's only trying to help. You should be grateful we've taken you in." The dismissal cut like a knife. My own son, the boy I had raised, was brushing aside my fears as though they were foolish fancies. I wanted to shake him, make him see, but his loyalty was already elsewhere. That night, alone in bed, I turned the wedding ring over and over between my fingers. The brown folder with the deed was still gone, the keys vanished, my independence slipping through invisible cracks. Every symbol of my life, my home, my marriage, my freedom, was under quiet siege. And I knew then, this wasn't about love or care anymore. It was about control. It was past midnight when I stirred awake, thirsty. As I padded down the hall, I heard voices from the kitchen, low but sharp like knives being drawn. I froze just before the doorway. "We can transfer the deed into your name," my daughter-in-law whispered, her tone urgent. "It's better this way. Once the papers are signed, we'll have control." My pulse thundered. Daniel's voice followed, hesitant. "But it's still her house." "What if she refuses? She won't stop us," she hissed. "She's too confused half the time anyway." "If we wait, we risk complications. Better we handle it before she loses her memory." I gripped the wall to steady myself, bile rising in my throat. My son didn't argue. He didn't defend me. He simply sighed, weary but complicit, and let her words hang in the air like a verdict. That was enough. I stepped into the kitchen, trembling but upright, Robert's framed photograph clutched to my chest. Their heads snapped toward me, eyes wide, guilt flashing before irritation replaced it. "I heard everything," I said, my voice raw but firm. "You would take the home Robert built for me? The house he entrusted me with? And you, Daniel, my son, you'd let her?" Daniel's face tightened. "Mum, please calm down. You've misunderstood." "Misunderstood?" I held up the photograph, my knuckles white. "Robert trusted me. He trusted you to care for me, not strip me of everything we built together." My daughter-in-law's smile turned thin, mocking. "Evie, it's not as dramatic as you're making it. You're slowing down, and this is practical. We're securing the future for everyone. Honestly, it's better this way. Before you start forgetting things altogether." The cruelty in her words pierced me deeper than any knife. She wanted me to doubt my mind, my memory, my worth. I shook my head, tears pricking my eyes but resolve burning through them. "You think I'm weak. You think I'll surrender. But you're wrong." Daniel looked away, shame flickering across his features but not enough to move him. He said nothing, not one word in my defense. That silence was louder than her taunts, and in that silence, something broke. The illusion that my son would protect me, that family was safety, dissolved like smoke. I finally saw him, not as the boy I had raised, but as a man willing to sacrifice his mother for comfort. I straightened, setting Robert's photo on the table between us like a shield. My hands no longer trembled. This house will never be yours. Do you hear me? Never, she sneered. We'll see about that. But I had already made my decision. That night, lying awake, I knew what I had to do. I could no longer wait for Daniel's loyalty or hope for her kindness. If I wanted to protect Robert's legacy and my independence, I had to fight, alone if necessary. The plan began forming in the dark. I would seek help, secure the deed, and make sure they could never touch what was mine. For the first time in months, I felt something stronger than fear. Determination. That night, I moved in silence. The house felt foreign, hostile, but I walked its hallways one last time with purpose. In my room, I packed only what mattered: a small bag with clothes, Robert's photograph, and the spare house key I had hidden years ago in a shoebox no one else knew about. My hands shook as I tucked it inside, but this time it wasn't from fear, it was resolve. When the house fell quiet, I slipped out into the cool night air, heart pounding with each step down the driveway. For the first time in months, I felt in control of my own direction. By morning, I sat across from a solicitor, clutching Robert's photo like an anchor. I explained everything: whispers in the kitchen, missing papers, the stolen ring. He pulled up the documents, checked the records, and finally looked at me with steady reassurance. Mrs. Williams, the house is legally yours. No one can transfer ownership without your signed consent. They don't have that. Relief washed over me so deeply it brought tears to my eyes. For weeks, I'd felt like a ghost in my own life, powerless and unheard. Now I had proof, armor against their schemes. The solicitor filed protections to ensure no forgery or coercion could touch the deed again. When Daniel and his wife discovered I was gone, the truth unfolded. Their plans lay bare, their control snapped. They had underestimated me, mistaking age for weakness. A week later, I stood once more before the front door of my home. My home. I pulled out the brass key, its weight solid in my palm, and slid it into the lock. The click was more than sound. It was a heartbeat, a promise renewed. Inside, the room smelled of dust and memory, but they were mine. My photographs lined the walls, Robert's chair still by the window. I closed the door firmly behind me, locking it with hands that no longer trembled. The keys had always been more than metal. They were dignity, freedom, proof that I still belonged. And as I held them again, I knew I had reclaimed not only my house, but myself. Loneliness wasn't my greatest danger. It was trusting the wrong people with the keys to my life. I thought moving in with Daniel and his wife would mean comfort, safety, family. Instead, I discovered how easily love can be twisted into leverage when money and property are involved. Looking back, the whispers, the missing papers, even the stolen ring, they were warnings. My heart wanted to dismiss them, to believe my son would protect me. But the truth is simple. Sometimes, the people we raise grow into strangers with their own hungers. I've learned to guard my independence, to trust my instincts, and to never hand over control simply because it feels easier. Age doesn't erase our right to dignity. I'm safe now and stronger. But tell me honestly, what would you have done in my place?